Yeah. All right, people are ready to go. So glad you're here today. Welcome. My name is Nadine Block. I use she, her pronouns. I am the ETC or Executive Training Conductor, otherwise known as etc. Because at Beautiful Trouble, we are a small team and we all do lots of different things. I do focus mainly on training and education. Really, really happy to be here today for a quick overview of a tool in our toolbox called the Movement Compass, helping activists and organizers understand where they are in the cycle of organizing, because we have recognized that there often is a cycle, and that can help us as activists engage more effectively, more efficiently, and support our long-term success. So I'm calling in today, as I said, from Quinnipiac lands, that's up in New England and Connecticut. And we are going to jump in. I think I'll quickly start off by sharing, in case you're here for the first time, about Beautiful Trouble. We are dedicated to creative tools for a more just world, or as Tony Cade Bambara said, making revolution irresistible. And we are doing that because we totally believe in the power of people coming together and using creative and innovative means to make change in their own lives for progressive ends, for a more just, equitable, peaceful, greener, healthier world. And we love working with communities who come together to do that, to have impact in their own lives. So just for those of you who haven't visited us before, when you get to our website, you can see that in the top, you can click through to the toolbox. Just a very quick overview of our toolbox, which is organized in a way that starts with stories first, but teases out the lessons from these stories to make them more accessible to you, which is a general theme and superpower of Beautiful Trouble. We are really interested in making things available easily, making things accessible via languages. At the top of this slide here, you can see that we have tabs for different languages: Arabic, English, Spanish, French, Italian, Bangla, Portuguese, et cetera, Russian. You can click through. We have more languages in the works. And we also tease out these lessons from the story so that they're much more accessible. And in addition, we have methodologies, which are tools on how to use some of these lessons in your own work, make it much easier to do in your own work. And that's where we're going to pick up today. We're going to start off with one of the tools, one of the methodologies called Movement Cycle. But before I forget, I also will click on the training drop-down menu, and I want to recommend to those of you who are trainers, facilitators, organizers looking for resources to help with learning or using some of the tools, particularly things like Spectrum of Allies, or learning how to manage conflict within your groups or external to your groups, who are looking for tricks and tools and tips as facilitators. This is a card-based strategy deck that you can download yourself for free off the website. And we have a brand new module. Some of you joined us for the Beautiful Action Trainers module version of this mid-month Monday session where we reviewed BATMO. And even since then, we have a new module number 12, which you can scroll down and see. And this one, I'll just click through so you can see it. This is about building resilience, self-care and community care for the long haul. And each one of these modules, whoops, can you go ahead and mute yourself if that's a possibility? For each one of these modules, you can see there's a list at the bottom in a table about exercises that you can do that support facilitation or training and organizing in the theme of building resilience, self-care and community care for the long haul, in this case, which is module 12. And the other situations, as you can see, are a whole bunch of, I think there's 7 modules on everything from learning about nonviolent action history to creative action design. And then now there's 5 modules on facilitation practices that can be helpful in your work. So that's a quick overview about some of what we do at Beautiful Trouble. Oh, and one more thing before I forget. that we have here that's available to you is the Get Up, Rise Up Fund. And actually, we've just moved it. So it's not on the main page anymore, but it's the Direct Action Fund and a drop-down link. And if you apply by the 5th of every month, we offer very small targeted funds, $500 to $1,000, for those who are very strapped with resources and are doing ongoing campaigns where a small injection of money can help you achieve your direct action goal. And if you apply quickly, by the 5th of a month, we aim to get the money to you in a couple of weeks. So really glad you're all joining us today. Again, this is the 4th in a series of introductory sessions, overviews to the world of beautiful trouble. And today we are going to be talking about the movement compass. So you can see, you can click right through here, and I'm going to jump right into the movement compass tool. The thing to know about the movement compass tool is that it's really designed to help activists and organizers figure out where you are in a cycle that is somewhat common in our trajectories of campaigns. And this can be both comforting and discomforting to activists. But really what we're talking about is helping people understand that others have gone before you and that you can potentially anticipate trainings, actions, internal organizing work that could help you prepare for the next stage of the movement that you're in. So you can start almost anywhere on this curve, if you will, and you'll notice that on the left side, what we're trying to measure is the movement's power. And on the bottom, this is the movement's power over time. I will say that we would like to give credit to groups that have gone before us and have developed the thinking behind a lot of this work. And that would be Bill Moyers, who has had a project called the Movement Action Plan, which mapped out stages of a movement in another way. And actually, maybe I will click through to that just for a minute so you can see it. You can see that there are 8 stages. This is from the Commons Library, and we'll drop this link in the chat for you to follow up on if you're interested. There's a number of things written about looking at the cycles of movements and the phases that movements go through to help activists deal with it more effectively. So, and then the other thing that we have basis on is the Movement Net Lab work. And you will see that their curve, if you will, their line looks very similar to this. But you can feel free to enter this wherever you are. If you have done some thinking about your movement, you're engaged in a program right now, perhaps I know one of the ways that ActionAid, and we're really lucky today to have, I think, 3 people who are using this work, this tool, or have recently used the tool in their trainings to talk about it. But you can enter it anywhere you want. Maybe we'll just start an Enduring Crisis because that's the beginning. When you click on Enduring Crisis, you can see when you scroll down, we're talking about a moment when there's a big problem. Maybe a lot of people know about it, but maybe not enough, even though the injustice is escalating, right? And the movement infrastructure is not quite up to par. So what do we do here? Here's some theories. When you click on Learn More, each one of these phases has the commentary about what the phase might look like for you. And it has inspiration for this phase linked to principles, stories, theories, and methodologies within the Beautiful Trouble toolbox. Of course, this is not the only way to work during this phase of Enduring Crisis, but it's inspiration to get you started. So we are going to also to take a moment to acknowledge that there is a to-do list on the side that can help you think about what is powerful to do in this moment. And this to-do list is not, of course, totally inclusive. It's just the beginning of a way to think about what your work time could be like, how to best spend your time when you're just in a mobilization moment. So in this case, we're talking about building cooperation, formulating your grievances. We have a new entry into the toolbox talking about taking your hardships and actually putting them into grievances, which other people can recognize as common problems. and also even different types of training that could be useful in this moment. So this is where we're starting with the movement compass. People have used it to both analyze where they are in their own movement structure, their own campaigns. You can also do education with this. You could watch a segment from, let's say, The Force More Powerful, or read a short story from the Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding Guide, and we can drop links for those in the chat as well, where you could look at a campaign or a movement that already existed and try to analyze where they were on this movement cycle and think about if they did the right things to support their movement in the moment, or if something else could have been more effective if they had done it. Or potentially, if they did something else, how that related to what came next. So this is a very, very quick review of the movement cycle. Again, it goes from enduring crisis to an uprising where you have great mobilization, a peak where you might have what seems like a very high level of engagement and potentially some significant changes. And then necessarily the movement goes through contraction. Sometimes this is accompanied by disillusionment. And at this point, it's incredibly important to think about what you're going to do to support people. This might be a great time to do self-care, community resilience building, and figure out what your next steps are as you evolve into the next cycle. Very important at this point that this necessarily is not a cycle that has a very clear beginning and an end, but rather repeats something maybe more like a helix rather than a straight line, and that hopefully we keep ending up in a slightly different and better location, to stronger and more resilient to keep on organizing and taking on additional issues that are in our communities. So I think that's the quickest overview of the movement cycle. And I hope that people are here to discuss it. I know 3 people online who are able to join us and talk about how they use it and tools that they have developed to make it more accessible during trainings. So we have Helle from ActionAid, we have Ramberto, also from ActionAid in El Salvador. Helle is in Denmark, and we have Ray, who's in the United States, and I know just used this with a group of a 4-day training for activists working on animal rights. So we're really excited to meet you all. Feel free again, while folks tee up to talk, to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, what group you're with. And if you have questions for us to answer, we like to take some significant time during these things to exchange questions you have about using the tool, and maybe hopefully answers and suggestions on how you have used this tool. So if people are ready, I'd love to invite Helle to come up and share a little bit about ActionAid and ActionAid's use of the movement cycle.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Thank you for the invitation, and good to be here with so many different people. So I know some of you already. I can see Araceli is also here, and Monica is also joining. Phil is joining, so good to see you. I have prepared a few slides also to try and introduce how we in ActionAid Denmark, or in the MOVE team, have been working with the movement cycle to try and see if we can make learning activities or initiatives that fits each of the stages in the movement cycle. And Nadine, so you already shared a little about the cycle, and that many people have used it before us. So I had some of the same idea actually. So I will not spend much time on that. I will just like to say that, yeah, Bill Moyer is an inspiration, of course, or maybe it's not only an inspiration, more than that. We also looked at NetLab, which is clearly even more closer to what we have been working on. And then we have very much used this matrix to look at different activities you can do. So what are the highest priorities? What is happening each of the phases? And how do we prepare for the next phase? And I think the how do we prepare for the next phase is something that is very useful for us, because sometimes I think as activists we can be a little surprised when the next thing is taking place, and we are not necessarily very well prepared for it. So this is what we have trying to do, is to try and help activists, campaigners, movements, while they are engaged in their campaigns and activities. We can run a little, we can be a little before them, and then try and be helpful with presenting what they can think about when they are preparing for the next phase. So these two lines here, what are the highest priorities and how do we prepare? This is inspiration for us. I think maybe also acknowledging Marshall Gans and the organizational cycle, which is similar but has like several peaks in a campaign. And these three then is somehow merged together in our learning material, which you can find on Gold ActionAid Learning. It's a learning platform, it's free and everybody can use it. And we of course also linking to the beautiful Trouble toolbox in our learning material. Yes, so as Nadine said, you can click in and see what is happening, the to-do list and how to prepare. And that is in general how we have prepared our courses. So what we have done is that we have made courses for the different phases of the movement cycle. So it's online self-paced courses and then live sessions. So we, based on what is happening to do and how to prepare, we have developed a course curriculum. And this is an example from the Enduring Crisis with 6 different modules. So the first one around formulating grievances, storytelling inspired by the Marshall Gans approach, building relationships, and different modules on power. And then we know that the next thing in the movement cycle is about the trigger event, so we are also pointing to that one. So I think that was basically what I wanted to share with you, Nadine and team. So if any questions, you're more than welcome.
Oh, Helen, that's perfect. Thank you for sharing those slides. And we really encourage folks who are using it to go deep into Bill Moyer's brilliant work. He also has a wonderful tool on types of activists or organizers that can be very useful for people. I think what we'll do is we'll have all 3 folks speak. Maybe Rem, you can go next. And then we'll have Ray. And then we will take questions all together. Feel free to write them in the chat as they come up as well, and we'll try to keep tabs on them. And we'll come back and have a lively conversation when we do come back. Rem, you ready to go?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, I think like I can talk about mostly about our experience using it, this movement cycle. And I think it's been very useful. You know, we have been doing like kind of a mapping for all over Central America, well, at least for Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and a bit from Nicaragua. We use, I mean, it's very, very, what can I say? Very useful tool for us, because it's also allowed us to identify where we are now as a social movement, but also where we were in the past. So it's good to have a look in the back, I mean, look in the past, into the past, and know what we did good, what we did wrong, what could have been better, and learn from our mistakes, but also from what people did very well. So we have been used this social movement cycle to identify exactly where we are now, you know, as it's supposed to be. But it's been really, really nice to understand. I mean, to use it as a narrative. Now we are talking about that all the time. Where are we now? What's the social movement situation nowadays? Where have been the golden years, if we can name it somehow, where people were more united and they were more together? We have very similarities with Central America about the social movement stage now, which is kind of a very, I would say, very challenging for social movement because of the we're having less and less rights, let's say somehow, because all the kind of new dictatorship rising as well with a new recipe, I'm gonna say. But talking about the social movement cycle, has been very fruitful, and I think it's good. It's a good time to invite you all because we're gonna do the whole GP work on a mapping, the one I'm talking about. We would like to present it for you, so you're all invited for the next. It's this 27th of this month, so we're gonna present in this mapping that we prepare with all social movements that we work with in Central America. And it's basically, our narrative was the social movement cycle. So it's basically we're talking about the same thing. So how was our experience talking about using as a guideline that where are we now, what we're gonna do next, what are our insights or learnings, and what's coming next. So I think, like, for now, to say it in in a few words, that's that we have been using the social movements, but it's social movement cycle. And it's something very, also, I would like to add that when we talk about our trainings, it's also a good reflection to make for us, to use it as a reflection about the youngsters' situation related to social movements. And also when we talk about, also to discuss something that we take for granted, that we all know what it is, social movements in a regular organization. So we're talking about what the social movement is. We take it for granted. Oh, social movement is people getting together, but what is it about? So it's very good. I mean, it's very, I'm going to use the word fruitful, very fruitful tool. So I just want to say thanks and please join us for the next 27.
This is great. And Rem, if you're able to put a link in, put a link in. Otherwise, we'll send it out in follow-up emails so people can join. Really exciting. And I love this word fruitful, because I think that's the essence of a tool. We don't really want people to use the tool if it's not useful. What we want people to do is understand that any tool, whether it's movement cycle, and you'll notice also we use two words. Movement cycle is the name of the methodology, and movement compass is sort of another name that we use on our website. So you'll see it in both places, but it's the same thing. And what we want people to do is understand that tools can help you organize your thinking. And in this way, you get better answers to your questions. And that's maybe where the most fruitful use is of any of these tools. So really, really thank you for that. Particularly, as Rem said, new authoritarian pushback is happening and the civic spaces are closing, and people power needs all the support it can get. I really do thank you for that. So one more conversation, and then we'll open it up for all of your questions and comments on how you've been using it. So I think I'll invite Ray in. Are you available, Ray, to speak with us?
Yeah. Hi,
Awesome.
everyone. Good day. As Nadine mentioned earlier, I'm Ray. I'm a trainer with Beautiful Trouble, she and they pronouns, and I just got back from Los Angeles, where I was co-facilitating with a Beautiful Trouble trainer team, 4-day training for activists connected with the farmed animal liberation movement and folks working on animal rights and animal welfare. We had about 40 participants in our movement building track at that gathering, and we on our first day did an exercise in movement mapping. So I'm just going to share a photo. This isn't in a slide, but this is a photo of the group doing some movement mapping, taking Post-it notes. We had 2 groups mapping the movement within, so naming all the different organizations, groups, grassroots contingents of the animal rights movement they're organizing, and then 2 groups mapping a movement of movements, thinking about allied social movements and how they might build more intersectional connections with other social movements. And so that was more spatial, right? Thinking about movement ecology, who's in the space. And of course, that changes over time. But then after that activity, we went into the movement compass to think about over time, how do movements ebb and flow? And we presented it as one tool of many, with the acknowledgement that many of us, depending on our movement orientation, our cultural backgrounds, relate to time in different ways. And I think what was interesting about the conversation in this group was the discussion on the trigger point. And I think that word can be loaded. We invited people to use whatever word speaks to them, but that kind of igniting moment that can build people power quickly, and a recognition from some of the participants of not having that trigger moment, or looking at how moments that had been predicted to be trigger moments. So let's say, for example, a really shocking, horrific video of treatment of animals in factory farms might not be the trigger moment that is anticipated anymore. And why is that, right? And so using the tool as a way to evaluate past experience and see why or why not we followed that curve. And then I invited everyone to draw the map in their notebooks and place themselves and their organization within it, and then think about where their movement is. And it prompted a really interesting conversation. I think having a moment for people to have self-reflection first was important. And then the group conversation about what do you do when you're in that last part of the curve, where you're in the more reflect and adapt phase, and how do you prepare? And one of the key takeaways for this group was not only where are you in the cycle and what tools could you use now, but how can you anticipate where you're going and plan accordingly down the road. So I just wanted to share my screen here on the tool that Nadine was talking about, which is the how to use box. So really specific instructions here. And again, there's this considering what you're doing now, and I would just add what you might do in the future. How do you use this tool to prepare? And we're always looking for examples to add as, you know, kind of real world examples to these tools. So just putting that out there. And as I was also reflecting on this tool, I remembered this cartoon. It's a little bit blurry here. The mathematician, right, who's doing the math problem, and at some step in the problem, then a miracle occurs, right? And I think sometimes in our theory of change, we have this magical thinking. And so this tool can help us to say, maybe it's not a miracle, you know, could be divine intervention, depending on your spiritual philosophy. But, you know, there's actually some planning here, right? Some predictability, and that can help us. The other thing I wanted to point out, some of you might be familiar with agile versus waterfall thinking. I would say this theory comes from nature itself. The idea of an actual waterfall versus a stream going downriver, that also comes out of some of the thinking from the tech world. But the movement compass presents us a kind of a singular line, and we can understand that there's many little iterative eddies along the way. So as we're building people power, as we're building our movements, we probably are also trying out strategies, and hopefully, to reference another tool from the toolbox, we're failing forward, right? We're failing fast, we're learning iteratively. So maybe there's some little eddies along that bigger cycle to pay attention to, just acknowledging that it's not one major push. And another cartoon just to illustrate that, this one, these folks have built this, you know, big concrete bridge, and they're saying maybe we should build a boat instead. You know, just how do we not get too far down the road before we think about a different strategy that might serve us better? And I think that's really what this movement cycle tool is doing, is giving us the opportunity to understand better where we are in time and plan and act accordingly. At our training this past week, we were trying to center the wisdom of the more than human world as much as possible. And so I'll drop in the chat one of the quotes that we completed this session with, which was about time and how we view time, a quote from Alexis Pauline Gumbs' book, Undrowned: Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. Just thinking about urgency, and she's saying here, you know, marine mammals offer slowing down as a strategic intervention in a world on speed, an appropriate response to the exact urgencies that make us feel we cannot slow down. So that feels like a bit of an asterisk maybe to this tool around how do we build momentum, seize the moment, and also continue to act for the long haul. I'll just leave it
All
there.
right. Thank you, Ray. That's great. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Hele. Thank you, Humberto. So we have, for those of you just joining us, we've got, we had an overview of the movement cycle and movement compass, or movement compass, you can call it either thing, from both the Action Aid Denmark course delivery perspective, the use of it in El Salvador and in Latin America to look at social movements regionally, and then a specific use explained from a 4-day training that just happened in LA, in Los Angeles. So LA being both Latin America and Los Angeles in this in this particular moment. So really excited to hear questions and comments from those of you who want to use it but have questions about how, or commentary from those of you who have been in the movement cycle and you want to share aha moments with us. And I will, as people key up, I will say this quote around the slowing down is also reflected clearly in many other thought, significant thoughts, thought leaders in the world. The Buddhists saying, because we have so little time, we must move very slowly. And I know even the military has a saying like this, but I don't ever remember what it is on purpose, I think. So really invite you all to join the conversation. We have here lots of current and former Beautiful Trouble related crew members, which is really great. I see Dragonfly, Chelsea, I see Araceli and others. So feel free. And I see Jonathan and Sarah potentially in here. So feel free to join in, as well as other folks related to Beautiful Trouble and Action Aid, Monica, Phil, etc. So who would like to, feel free to unmute or raise your hand or put in the chat any comments or questions you have. And we'll jump right in. We have another, 8 or 9 minutes. I see Kermit has a hand up. Go ahead, Kermit, and then Sammy.
Yeah, hi. I think that Ray touched on this a little bit, but it's my sense that when we talk about enduring crises, like big things like climate change or food apartheid and such, that these sort of things like encapsulate the cycle, right? There's many people working on it, and their cycle is happening on a small scale within the bigger crisis, right? So a lot of my work right now focuses on coalition building, and so I imagine that. Well, not imagine, I know for a fact that as I work with other organizations, it's like, okay, well, there are different parts of the compass than from each other. So how do you like reconcile that? Where it's like, okay, this group is saying like, oh no, we're at the high point, we're at the honeymoon, we're doing great, but the bigger crisis, not really, right? You're not doing great because it's still happening. So how do you sort of like negotiate or reconcile that difference in terms of where people are in the cycle so that people can work together towards the bigger challenge?
That's a great question. And I think we're going to I see 3 questions. Let's put them all out here and then we can all answer them together. I will invite Sammy to unmute and ask the question or say whatever you want. And then I see Livert has put one in the chat as well. And let's discuss them all together.
Sure. I'm so Sammy from Canada. First, I just wanted to say I'm blown away by how organized this is. I'm a newbie. I just found Beautiful Trouble. So when I discovered it, I was like a kid in a candy store. So I'm, you could say, an anti-war activist. Maybe I would refer to myself as an emerging art activist. I have a leadership background, but also art is kind of my thing. I wanted to put those together. So when I found your book, I got excited. But because I want to kind of get into this and accelerate my learning curve, my question is like, what is the one course or the one training opportunity you would recommend for someone like me who wants to get into this and also train others? Is there one course that you would recommend? Because there seem to be a few options out there and I don't know where to start.
All right. Well, I will invite, let's hold that too. And then anybody who wants to put a comment in the chat about courses, feel free to do it because we do know in this room would be a lot of recommendations. So Livert, do you want to unmute and ask your question or should I read it? I don't know.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go for it.
Hello? My network is traveling, so you can read.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll read it. So Livert asks in the chat, for those who can't see it, how do we know the stage of a movement with signs of more than one stage? which is definitely related to what Kermit is talking about. And is it possible to do activities from a previous stage, which you see necessary, even though you are in a higher stage? So that's really great. And I think, why don't, I see there's one more hand. So we'll hear from Chris, and then I really want to open it up. I know the collective knowledge on here can answer some of these questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to jump in, but there's plenty of collective knowledge. And if you have a specific question, maybe I'll give Hele, Rem, and Ray a chance to answer some of the questions that have come in too. Chris, go ahead and say whatever you'd like.
Thanks. I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and Moyer's movement action plan is very familiar to me. I've looked at the compass, though never applied it specifically. Nonetheless, I'm very curious about, I suppose one way to put it is, what does success look like? But what I'm pointing at is the way that, some of our work, in success, and sometimes it's a little mixed, leads to institutionalization of various kinds. And so coalitions become organizations that have, that have a 10, 20, 30-year life. I'll spare citing examples of such, but I'm curious where the consequence or the outcome of institutionalization fits in the model. How one or more of you might see that.
Great. And I will say, I see Hele dropped in the NGOization of movements, which we do have in the tool, a commentary on, a little entry in the Beautiful Trouble toolbox, both on the NGOization of protest, and we also have something called Solidarity Not Aid, both of which might be pretty interesting to look at. So anybody, I'd love to, since I'm so happy Hele and Rem and Ray showed up, do you all want to answer or comment on any of the questions that came in? Happy to let you all take first jump at it. Talking about movement cycle, how to accommodate different organizations feeling like they're in different places on the movement cycle, and which relates to movement. Sometimes you have characteristics that are more usually identified with one part of the cycle that are occurring in another part of the cycle, and that there might be activities that you do in a part of the cycle that you might have originally done at a different moment. And then any comments about what success looks like and institutionalization and the issues there? Anybody want to take it on? Don't be shy, Hele, Ray, or Rem.
Yes, I'm happy to. I was just waiting to see if any of the others were jumping in. But I think, like every other tool in the whole world, it's just a tool. So I think mostly it's an analytical approach, and I can only say, like, when I have, I shared it last week with Syrians from the revolution in Syria while traveling in Lebanon, and the person I talked to, she was running out of the room crying because she was saying, if only I knew this, if only we had known this. And I think that's the reaction I meet most of the time. Also, when it comes to the contraction, where you have been on that peak, maybe you have been a lot of people on the street, and then you see everything is falling apart and you feel sad, demotivated. It's often a very emotional thing to be on the peak. Maybe it has been 3 months, you have been camping on the streets, your family don't understand you, nobody of your close friends understand you, only your activist friends, right? So when you get to see, like, this happened to others before us, and it's not the end. This is not the end. So maybe maybe the movement cycle, maybe you passed through it, maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes 3 years, but there will come new openings. And the trigger event is not necessarily always something that comes from the outside, but it's maybe also an opportunity you can look for yourself, like an election is coming up, or somebody is visiting town, or like you can make the trigger event or use it like a window of opportunity instead. So I think it's more like it's just a tool. It has different characteristics, and when looking at it, you can see, like, okay, for instance, when we made the courses, we didn't make we put uprising and peak into the same module because we knew that nobody would have time to do a course during the peak. But it would be good to know that you will get to a point where you will have built enough power so you would be interested in negotiation. And if you don't know that that time will come, and if you don't have clear demands, if you don't have a strong discipline within your movement, you might lose that opportunity. So I think it's just a tool. It has different phases. You can read through it and see what fits to our situation. Did we think about negotiation? Do we have a clear communication plan? How do we get new people onboardings? Because when we're getting busy, we forget to continue recruiting and onboarding. And when everything looks like it's falling apart, we try to be there with new lessons like how can you reflect, learn, recover, care for each other, figure out like maybe it's time for conflict resolution also if you disagreed a lot. Sorry, I've been speaking a lot, but I really think it's interesting to with the many different ways you can use this as an analytical framework, and like Humberto and his team has done in El Salvador, trying to help to map different movements using the cycle to see as a global platform in the ActionAid family, how can we be supportive of the different movements depending on where they are currently in the cycle. Thank you.
Yeah, really great. And Ray or Rem, do you want to chime in too on anything? And then I see Dragonfly has a hand.
I just would like to say that the matter of a tool, it's supposed to be useful, right? And if it's not useful, I think it's not working. This one, we find it, at least in our context, very useful. But you don't have to. But I think I also consider that it must be flexible. In my opinion, it is a flexible tool. But I'm saying this because you need to adapt to your own. You need to adapt the tool to your own context. It's not a recipe, but it's something useful that you can use. I mean, for your own purpose. As in El Salvador, we have been discussing about where are we now, and it seems we have trigger events almost every day. Like, when are we supposed to be? When does this is going to be exploded? How? What else do we need? Right. So it's something a constant discussion. So the tool gives like the opportunity to be discussing and to find more, how to say, possible tactics or new tactics, and discuss what do we need to move next. So I just wanted to say that, like, from our own experience. So it's kind of perhaps you have the feeling that you're stuck in one stage, and perhaps you are. So it's a very useful again tool. I mean, to notice where you are now.
Yeah, really appreciate that. And Ray, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to acknowledge and give a shout out to Sarah Nahar, who's also on this call and was a co-trainer at the Lead for Farmed Animals gathering last week, and on with her family. Glad to have you all here, and the Beautiful Trouble Training Network, and welcoming anything you'd like to share as well about this tool. And just to underscore what Dragonfly is sharing in the chat about, like, an individual person might find themselves at a different place than the movement or than the organization on the cycle. Like, this is not monolithic, right? It's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all version. And it's just, you know, the one way to help see ourselves. And I was just going to say too, movement history, like understanding understanding how these cycles have played out in our longer term history. It took us a moment at our gathering last week to realize that different people in the room had different understandings of the long history of this movement. And it was really helpful for us to facilitate a dialogue and get on the same page around a shared sense of movement history. So this could be useful for that too. And just curious, I don't know, Sarah, if you want to add anything.
Okay, I'll just let folks know
okay.
we will get off in a couple minutes, so we're running over a few minutes, but it's been such a fruitful discussion. It's really awesome. We won't go the full hour. I will say there is a tool called the Timeline tool that you can access in the SNAP, the Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peace Building Guide, that does help you do what Ray mentioned about looking at how people view history and the timeline leading up to events leading up to certain crises. And that can be an incredible aha moment for folks. And
Nadine, can I add another tool from Snap that I think overlays well with Movement Compass?
Yeah, go for it. And we'll take a minute and then Kermit will get back to your question and then we'll close up. Really, really fabulous.
The Adam Curl diagram is what I've generally used before Movement Compass, and that is in the Snap Guide as well. And just looks at, like, you know, these dynamics of overt or covert power relations and equality, inequality, and the dynamism versus the static moment. And I can imagine having a really big Adam Curl diagram and then having like little movement compasses and cycles like at different points on that. So as a way to address what we learned last week, Ray, is around like small trigger points and then like overall ones. And so one thing I appreciate about Beautiful Trouble in the deck is being able to use like two tools at once to create a type of layering that allows for the multifacetedness of our experiences to come forward.
Really nice. Yeah. And this is the tools are designed to be used with each other. As Rem said, like you want to use them so that they're useful. Really great. And go ahead, Dragonfly, and then we'll close out.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Dragonfly. I'm the communicatrix. I thank you, Ray, for amplifying what I was saying. And I'm hoping that this, for you, Kermit, can bring it kind of a full circle. I'm just looking at and understanding the fractalization, right, of cycles. It looks very similar to the human life cycle. When the first Black Lives Matter uprising happened, and I was out there on the streets, but by the time George Floyd happened, I was personally burned out and in a different phase. I think it's important to understand that, like, in the way that fractals work, yes, there's an overall trajectory for the whole movement, but there's also overall trajectories for all of the individuals that are in the movement. And we can also look at those trajectories in ways of how can a particular person, based on who they are and what they do, best fit in to the movement, right? So even though I may not have been out in the streets with my tambourine like I used to do, I found my art as a vehicle for adding to the movement. I also think that a lot of times when we think of activism, we do tend to think of the very loud ringleader with the tambourine. I mean that literally and metaphorically speaking. But the person who's an introvert making the spreadsheets is just as important. So look at the movement compass, not just as the movement itself, but how can we integrate each individual at where they are? The people that have that long history, they may not have the stamina to go out into the streets anymore, but they have the information and the lived experience to imbue into the people who are just coming into the movement. It has to be intergenerational. It has to be interracial. It has to be intercultural and all of those things. So look at the movement compass again as a fractal. Because even sometimes I wonder, okay, is Black Lives Matter its own movement? Or is it a continuation of the historic civil rights movement, which is a continuation of the abolitionist movement? It's its own movement and it's part of the same movement at the same time. And lastly, I think it's very important to understand that we can't afford to burn ourselves out. That's how movements die. So we have to, as part of the cycle, as individuals and as a movement, figure in the time to regroup and be caregivers for ourselves and each other. I hope that answered your question, Kermit.
This is really great. This is a very fruitful conversation and I know we're running over. So I just want to make sure if anybody has to go, we'd love to hear from you. This is the fourth in a four series. Welcome to the Universe of Beautiful Trouble session. We covered the toolbox, we covered BAT mode, the trainer's guides, we covered the movement compass, and we talked about using the card deck. So we would all of them have been recorded. They're available on YouTube channel, and we would love to hear from you. team@beautifultrouble.org is a way to reach all of us. What do you want next? What are you interested in doing with us? Give us a shout via email or on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And we would like to build with you the next series Potentially, we'll do exactly the same series again, but at a time zone that's more amenable to other parts of the world, particularly looking at Southeast Asia. Just, yeah, be in touch. Really invite everyone here. I can stay on for a little bit longer, but we promise people 45 minutes so that we know everyone is really busy, but we encourage you to play with the tools. The trick here is that one size does not fit all. One tool does not fit all. And the thing is, that is something, the tolerance of ambiguity and the living with the full potential of spectrum, whether it's about your personal identification or whether it's about movement phases, is the understanding that we need to be flexible and context specific and welcome in rather than leave folks out. And so we really invite you to play with things in that perspective. So really, thank you all. I invite everybody to unmute and say, have a good day or have a good night, goodbye, whatever thank you you'd like to say in your own language as we close out. We can hear from everybody. So feel free to unmute and have a great rest of your day, whatever it is, evening.
And
Ciao.
go out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, merci.
Good to see you, Daniel.
Mahalo nui loa. Bye, everyone.
Adios.